CTV News political commentator and former NDP leader Tom Mulcair joins us now with more insight. Nice to see you today, Tom.
Good to be with you, Caroline.
So where does this leave the Quebec Liberal Party?
Scrambling, because they're going to have to pull the same sort of thing that the Liberals did federally, have a very rapid leadership race to replace, of course, Pablo Rodriguez, and try to get ready for the election next October. You know, Caroline, everything was open to them in terms of possibilities. François Legault's party is tanking in terms of its popular support, under 20%. Parti Québécois right now, very high in the polls, but a little bit like Poilievre was. As long as Trudeau was there, Poilievre looked like the only place you could go to get rid of the Liberals. We all know what happened. Mark Carney came in instead of Trudeau, and the Liberals still won another election. It could be the same thing for the Quebec Liberals. They have a chance to defeat the Parti Québécois, which is promising to hold, believe it or not, a third referendum on sovereignty, as if the two previous ones didn't count. And that's absolute upheaval for the economy and for the social fabric of the place. 65% of Quebecers want nothing to do with that. But guess what? The PQ's at 35% in the polls, and that's enough because there are several opposition parties, all evenly divided right now. So I think that the Parti Québécois is going to have a comeuppance if the Liberals can get their act together and come up with somebody rapidly to replace Pablo Rodriguez. I think that your setup to this conversation was perfect. I mean, it was just essentially that. About 4.5 weeks ago, a series of revelations about what went on during his leadership campaign. He won a very narrow victory over the second-place finisher. And we were learning, as you mentioned, you know, there were allegations of vote buying, and all of this was dragging on. Different investigations were taking place, but it was something that happened this week. It was a very detailed explanation of people who had been told to give the $500 maximum on their own because it had to be per individual, and then they were all going to be given back an envelope with $500 in cash at a fundraising evening that Mr. Rodriguez attended. Now, he says he knows nothing about that. That's fine. That's yet to be proven. But it left such a smell of corruption around the provincial Liberals. He knew that his time was up. And what happens now, you're correct, there's a criminal investigation, an investigation by the Provincial Ethics Commissioner at the National Assembly, because even though he was the party leader, he wasn't elected. So the question is, were they using resources of the National Assembly for partisan political purposes? That's under investigation. Another investigation, of course, and several by Elections Quebec. So a new word entered the vocabulary. At one point, we had texts, again, unproven as to the source, but talking about everyone receiving a brownie for voting, apparently, for Mr. Rodriguez. And the brownie, of course, was a reference to the color of the $100 bill, a literal vote buying. And by the way, believe it or not, that was legal in Quebec up until last week when they finally changed the law, because you couldn't buy votes for a provincial election or a by-election, but they forgot to include leadership races. Huh. So that loophole's been closed since.
Okay, but the smell that you speak of, or the stain of alleged corruption, do you think that removing a party leader and putting in a new one in place will actually rid them of that stain?
Depends on who that new leader is. And now the second and third place finishers, certainly the second place finisher, a pharmacist named Charles Milliard, who headed up an employers group, very respected guy, very urban. And that's worth mentioning because there's a big divide in Quebec, as in other provinces. You've got one big metropolitan area of Montreal that has 4.5 million people, and the rest of the province has 4.5 million people. François Legault got his two majorities only speaking to the people outside of Montreal. He really didn't care about Montreal, and he proved that time and again. So the question is, are the Liberals going to be able to break their lock only on having people in Montreal and start being able to talk to the Quebec regions? That's the person that they need right now. Is Milliard that person? We'll see. There's another fellow, you know, very fine gentleman that I know quite well named Carl Blackburn, former colleague of mine when I was in the National Assembly in Quebec City. Great guy. But again, are they going to be the type of people who can rally enough folks, or would a fresh face? I mean, the dream candidate they have talked about, even though bringing somebody in from Ottawa didn't work last time, the dream candidate is François-Philippe Champagne. Everyone's quite convinced that he would win in a romp, but he is saying he wants nothing to do with it. We'll see how many people can join together to try to twist both of his arms, and if they can change his mind.
He was asked just that earlier today, and he said, no, not going to happen. Yeah. But we've seen people change their minds before. But how about Coalition Avenir Québec? Is there a chance here that they could say, well, if the Liberal parties have lost their good fortune, we could put a new leader in place and turn the tides? Or do you think that Legault is holding on to the reins here?
No, that's a great question. And Legault could very well decide to jump. About 1 hour ago, his health minister resigned. And his other person in Health and Social Services resigned a couple of months ago over the same topic. And they're both staying on as independents. So it's a way of saying we like this place, we're going to continue doing our work, but we're not sitting in cabinet with François Legault anymore. That is something that people are measuring, and they're realizing that there is a serious problem, not only within the party itself, but with the leadership of François Legault. They won by inventing a new party that was neither federalist nor sovereignist. They said that they were going to stay in Canada, but they had a very strong nationalist bent, and they were going to concentrate on the economy. The last part has been a total flop. They used the old Quebec formula of throwing taxpayers' money at different projects that failed time and again. So people are fed up with them, want to see them gone. But you're right. If somebody could come in there and say, look, you don't want a referendum, that's what the PQ is promising, and the Liberals are, and fill in the blank. I do a bunch of panel shows in Quebec, Caroline, and the Liberal brand has really suffered over this. All you have to do is say Liberal, and they add the word corruption. So if they can't get past that, that might be an argument that the CAQ could use. Say, look, vote for us. We're at least clean, which they are, and we're not the PQ promising a referendum.
10 months to go until the next provincial election. Lots to discuss.
Exactly.
Thanks so much. CTV News political commentator Tom Mulcair.